Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today we'll be talking about the sequence of tenses. I have already recorded 3 big videos on the grammatical tenses of English. You can find them on this channel. I don't promise you a short video, I never do. The videos on this channel are long because they are detailed. I try to give you as much information as I can on every subject that I explain here. And my goal is to create a comprehensive guide to the English grammar. I always have chapters in my lessons, you have time codes, so you can proceed to a particular part of the video that you're interested in, watch it first or rewatch it. This way or another, when I plan my lessons, I try to make them comprehensive. I try to answer all questions that my students usually have when they study this or that topic. So without further ado, let us begin with the sequence of tenses. To begin with, let's define what is the sequence of tenses. The sequence of tenses is a set of grammatical rules governing the agreement between the tenses of the verbs in the subordinate clause and those in the main clause. Before we continue, let's discuss what a clause is. Every sentence consists of clauses, and every clause has a subject and a predicate. Let's look at this sentence, for example. Angelus was upset because they hadn't invited him to the ceremony. We see that there are 2 subjects and 2 predicates in this sentence, so we can say that there are 2 clauses, the main clause and the subordinate clause. So Angelus was upset. Why? Why was he upset? Because they hadn't invited him to the ceremony. Angelus was upset is the main clause, and because they hadn't invited him to the ceremony is the subordinate clause of reason. Let's look at another example. Russell understood why Angelus was upset. Again, we see 2 subjects, Russell and Angelus, and 2 predicates, understood and was upset. So there are 2 clauses in this sentence. Russell understood is the main clause, and why Angelus was upset is the subordinate clause. Russell understood what? He understood why Angelus was upset. As our subordinate clause answers the question what, it's an object subordinate clause. We won't be talking about different types of subordinate clauses in this video and about some other peculiarities connected with subordinate clauses and types of sentences and yada yada. Our task today is to learn the rules of the sequence of tenses. So as you probably have noticed, these 2 sentences only contain past tenses. Both of them start with main clauses that are in the past simple tense. That actually means that we cannot use any future or present tenses in our subordinate clauses. And as you see in the first case, Angelus was upset because they hadn't invited him. The subordinate clause uses the past perfect tense, and in the second sentence, the subordinate clause contains the past simple tense. Was upset, right? So this leads us to the following idea. If the verb in the main clause is in one of the past tenses, a past tense or future in the past must be used in the subordinate clause. This is the main rule of the sequence of tenses. This is what you have to remember. As soon as your verb in the main clause is in one of the past tenses, your subordinate clauses should be sequenced appropriately. So they all will be in past tenses too. What past tenses in particular we'll discuss a little bit later, because that depends whether your actions in the main clause and in the subordinate clause are simultaneous or not. If something happens prior to something else or not, we'll discuss that a little bit later. Now let's concentrate on this. If the verb in the main clause is in one of the past tenses, a past tense or future in the past must be used in the subordinate clause. Let's look at the examples. He knew he had been working hard. The main clause contains a verb in the past simple tense. He knew. That means that our subordinate clause must contain a past tense too. In this case, it's past perfect continuous. She had been working hard. Obviously, we are talking about an action that preceded the action in the main clause and continued for a while, right? That's why we use the past perfect continuous tense. Let's look at a different example. The police officer asked her if she knew the truth. So the verb in the main clause, asked, is in the past simple tense. That means that the verb in the subordinate clause must be in a past tense too. In our case, it's the past simple tense too. If she knew the truth. They didn't believe that he told them everything. Again, the predicate in the main clause is in the past simple tense. So the predicate in the subordinate clause must be in a past tense too. He told them everything. And Jane said she was going to go to Sam's party. Jane said, the past simple tense is used in the main clause, so she was going to go to Sam's party. In the subordinate clause, we also use a past tense. Now, another scenario that we can encounter is when the verb in the main clause is in one of the present tenses or in one of the future tenses. Let's see. If the verb in the main clause is in one of the present or future tenses, any tense may be used in the subordinate clause, depending on what we want to express. Let's look at these examples. He knows she has been working hard. If you remember in the example in our previous slide, we used the past simple tense. We said he knew that she had been working hard. Here, our predicate in the main clause is in the present simple tense, knows. That gives us the freedom to use whatever tense we want, whatever tense we need in our subordinate clause. In this case, it's the present perfect continuous. The idea is the same. Yeah, the action has been going on for a while before now. Another example, the police officer asks her if she knew the truth then. Again, in our previous slide, we used the past simple tense in the main clause. Now we use the present simple tense. So we can use whatever tense we want in the subordinate clause, and that, of course, can be the past simple tense if we need it. The police officer asks now if she knew the truth then, in 1995, for example, yeah? They don't believe that he will tell them everything. They don't believe the present simple tense is used, so we can use a future tense in the subordinate clause. We can say, they don't believe that he will tell them everything. And the last example, Jane will never tell you she was going to go to Sam's party. In this case, the future tense is used in the main clause. But we can use a past tense in the subordinate clause. So this leads us to the idea. We can use present and future tenses in the main clause, and if we do, we can use any tenses in the subordinate clause. So there is no sequencing in this case, yeah? Apart from what has just been said, the actions expressed by the verbs in the main clause and by the verbs in the subordinate clause can be simultaneous or not. We can have three different scenarios. The action expressed in the subordinate clause can be simultaneous with the action expressed in the main clause. It can happen prior to that of the main clause, or it can happen after the action in the main clause. The choice of tenses will also depend on this. Let's see. The actions expressed in the subordinate clauses are simultaneous with the action expressed in the main clause. I know he likes historical fiction. I know now he likes now in general. So the present simple tense is used in both clauses because the actions are simultaneous. He told me he didn't want to go to France. The past simple tense is used in both clauses because the actions are simultaneous. She thinks the children are doing their homework in their rooms. So the present simple is used in the main clause and the present continuous or the present progressive is used in the subordinate clause. Both express the same tense but speak of different aspects. Think is the verb that we rarely can use in a continuous tense. In this case, it expresses opinion, not the process of thinking. So she thinks, the present simple is used, and the children are doing their homework. That's a process that is going on right now. So we want a progressive tense. The present progressive tense thus is used here. But still, these actions are simultaneous. They exist in the same room on the timeline. He thought his neighbors were arguing because he heard that they were speaking in raised voices. All the verbs in the sentence express actions that are simultaneous. He thought, again, this verb expresses his opinion, The past simple tense is used. The neighbors were arguing. It's a process in the past, but at that very moment when he thought that they were arguing, and he heard it at the same moment, He heard that they were speaking in raised voices. So everything was going on simultaneously, but these actions are of different aspects because some of them are processes, whereas others are mental states. Now let's look what happens if our actions in the main clause and in the subordinate clause are not simultaneous. They do not happen at the same period of time. In this case, we can have two scenarios. The first is when the action expressed in the subordinate clause happened prior to that of the main clause. These are the documents Anne has just printed out for you. So the documents are here, that's the present simple tense, but she has just printed them, that's the present perfect tense, because the action has already been completed by now. I think her eyes are red because she has been crying. The same, right? I think now that her eyes are red now because she has been crying for a while before now. This is the present perfect progressive tense. It shows us that our action has been going on for a while and brought a result to the present. Now, another example, I found out that they had been working for the company for 10 years. The main clause has its predicate in the past simple tense, I found out, and the subordinate clause contains the past perfect progressive tense because we want to show that this action had been going on before the past simple, before the action in the main clause. And the last one, yesterday I finally started reading the book my brother had brought me from England 2 years ago. Both actions are in the past, but one preceded the other. The action in the main clause is in the past simple tense. I finally started, but the action in the subordinate clause is in the past perfect tense because we want to show that this thing had happened before, The second scenario when our actions are not simultaneous is when the action expressed in the subordinate clause happens after the action in the main clause. This is where we might encounter future tenses. Let's see. I promise I will soon tell you everything you want to know. I promise now that I will do something in the future. So we're talking about a situation or an action that will take place after the action in the main clause. By the time you return from work tomorrow, your grandparents will have already arrived. We speak about two future actions, but one will happen earlier than the other. By the time you return, we use the present simple tense here because it's the subordinate clause of time. We'll speak about it in this class too. This is a separate case that we should discuss. Just like in conditional clauses, we cannot use future tenses in subordinate clauses of time. But we should understand that we speak about a situation in the future, by the time you return tomorrow, right? And the other action here, your grandparents will have already arrived, will have happened by the moment you return. So it will happen earlier or sooner, right? First, they will arrive, and only then you will return from work. So the action in our subordinate clause, by the time you return from work tomorrow, return, happens after the action in our main clause. Let's continue. We thought they would build a business center on that plot of land. We thought in the past that they will do something in the future. But what was the future for us there and then is no more the future for us today. And that's where we encounter the future in the past. So will is turned into would, and this way future in the past is formed. We thought they would build a business. It's incorrect to say we thought they will. We need to sequence these tenses. So we must say we thought they would build, or we thought they would be building, or we thought they would have built, whatever is the aspect. You should convert will into would. And obviously here the subordinate clause, they would build a business center on that plot of land, speaks of an action that happens after the action in the main clause. Our last example is Mary didn't realize how difficult the work would be. There and then she didn't realize how difficult the work would be in the future. The same situation, future in the past, is used here because we are talking about what was the future for her, but is no more the future for us. All these ideas that we have just discussed have to deal with the relative use of tenses in English. Let's look at this table attentively. Here we have two main clauses, I thought and she said. Both of them are in the past simple tense. So if your clause is in the past simple tense, you can have these scenarios. I thought he was Spanish. I thought they were staying at that hotel. I thought they had known each other for years. I thought she had been living in Beijing since 2010. In this case, the action in the main clause and the action in the subordinate clause are simultaneous. You can say, I thought she had already sold his car, or I thought she had been at home since Friday, or I thought it had been snowing all night long. In this case, the action in the subordinate clause is prior to the action in the main clause. And if we want to speak about an action that is posterior or that happens after the action in the main clause, we will have to use future in the past. That's the third scenario. For example, she said he would come soon. She said she would be working on Sunday. She said he would have finished the task by Monday. She said they would have been working on that project for 2 weeks. I hope that's clear. As you see, the main clauses here contain the words I thought and she said. I thought what? She said what. So we find the sequence of tenses predominantly in object clauses, and first of all, when we speak about reported speech. The sequence of tenses is mainly observed in subordinate object clauses, in particular in what is called reported speech and in so-called inner speech. Let's see what I mean. I don't like this movie, she said. She said she didn't like that movie. We reported her words, and that's what we got. Don't like is transformed into didn't like, and this movie into that movie. This is an example of reported speech. Now, the place wasn't too bad, she thought to herself. Or the job had been well done, he admitted. These are obviously things that are going on in their heads. Yeah, she thought to herself, what? Again, we have an object clause, but that's not a reported speech. It's her inner speech. So these two sentences are examples of inner speech. The rule of the sequence of tenses is followed because in the main clauses here, the verbs are in a past tense. In our case, in the past simple tense. She thought what? That the place wasn't too bad. He admitted what? He admitted the job had been well done. Okay, so what other verbs we can use to report somebody else's words? We can say he said, exclaimed, stated, noted, remarked, announced, mentioned, uttered, declared, and so on and so forth. Many verbs can be used. All those verbs that are synonyms to the word said. That. It was raining that day. Or he exclaimed that he lived close to the airport. Or he remarked that he had been married for already 10 years. And so on and so forth. Now, when we are dealing with inner speech, we can use all the verbs that help us express ideas similar to the verb think. She thought, she believed, understood, knew, felt, guessed, hoped, etc. that. It was raining that day. He believed that he lived close to the airport, or she knew that he had been married for already 10 years, and so on and so forth. We will not be talking about reported speech in this video in detail, because that will be the topic of our next lesson. There we'll discuss this in detail, what reported speech is, how different ideas can be reported, exclamations, statements, questions, what we do with conditional sentences in reported speech, and all those things. All those things will be discussed in the following video. Today I only want to pay attention to this relative use of tenses, and how they shift when ideas are reported. So let's look at this table. These are the 12 grammatical tenses of the English language. Active voice. Future in the past is also added because it's necessary for us to use future in the past when we sequence tenses, when we report somebody else's words. So what do? For example, if our direct speech is in one of the present tenses, we go one step backwards, and that's to the past tenses. So the present simple tense becomes the past simple tense, the present progressive tense becomes the past progressive tense, the present perfect tense becomes the past perfect tense, and the present perfect progressive tense becomes the past perfect progressive tense. One step back. Everything is very logical, right? Logically, if our direct speech is in one of the future tenses, all the future tenses become future in the past. So the future simple tense, the future progressive tense, the future perfect tense, the future perfect progressive tense will be in future in the past. For example, what does it mean? If I say, I will come tomorrow, my words can be reported the following way. She said she would come the following day. If I say, I will be working on this project for a while, the reported speech will be, she said that she would be working on this project for a while. Again, we'll discuss that in detail in the following lesson. For now, this is what we are to remember, that our present tenses go one step back into the past tenses, the future tenses go one step back into future in the past, What then do we do if our idea in direct speech is already in the past simple tense? Well, the past simple tense goes to the past perfect tense, one step back into the past, right? The past progressive tense logically goes into the past perfect progressive tense. The past perfect and the past perfect progressive go nowhere. You leave them unchanged if you need to report somebody's words that contain the past perfect tense or the past perfect progressive tense. They do not change. Now, when reporting something which was said in another place or a long time ago, adverbs of time and place may have to be changed too. What am I talking about? Here is change into there, this into that, these into those, now into then or at that moment, today into that day, yesterday into the day before or the previous day, tomorrow into the next or the following day, a month ago into a month before, tonight into that night, and last night into the previous night. It's logical, right? Because if I say I'm here now and somebody else reports my words 2 days after, here is not here anymore, yeah? And now is not now. It's already there and then. So this person should say, she said that she was there then. Or let's imagine a different situation. My friend Alice tells me, I quitted my job yesterday. I report these words, I tell about this to another friend of ours in a week. And I say, Alice told me that she had quitted her job the day before. What was yesterday at the moment of her speaking is just the previous day for me. Yeah, it's not yesterday anymore. Note that some modal verbs do go 1 degree back too. For example, will becomes would, can becomes could, may becomes might, and must becomes must or had to. But not always. Some modal verbs do not change. Could or could have done, might or might have done, should or should have done, needn't or needn't have done, do not change, they go nowhere. So you see could in here and you also see could here. That's because they express different things. In here, we speak about could that expresses a physical ability to do something. But could can also express a polite request or a probability. And that's this could. That's when we do not change it. For example, let's compare the sentences. He told us he could play the piano. Here we speak about a physical ability of a person to do something. His original speech, his direct speech, was, I can play the piano. That's why it was reported this way. He told us he could play the piano. Let's look at this sentence. She asked if I could help her. Her original speech was, could you help me please? So could was already used in her original speech and it was not changed because we are talking about a different could here. Not a could that expresses a physical ability to do something, but a polite request. And the third sentence, Alex insisted she couldn't have said it. What Alex said was, I couldn't have said it. Couldn't have done something expresses a probability or a possibility in the past and is not changed. So far, we have learned that when our predicate in the main clause is in one of the past tenses, we must follow the rule of sequence of tenses. This kind of situation we normally have when we report somebody else's words or when we are dealing with our inner speech, like I thought, he said, she believed, etc. Plus an object clause. So in this object clause, object subordinate clause, we will have to use the rule of sequence of tenses. But there are cases when this rule is not observed. The rules of sequence of tenses may not be observed. And when I say may not, I want to highlight that it's always a good idea to observe them. But you're free not to observe them in the following cases. So first of all, if the object clause expresses a general truth or something habitual or characteristic, that is something which is always true. The teacher told the children that water boils at 100 degrees Celsius. Giovanni said he plays tennis every Saturday. The young lady knew the place she had been invited to is very popular. So as we see in our subordinate clauses, we do not follow the rule of sequence of tenses. We don't change anything, even though our predicates in the main clauses are in the past. The teacher told the children that the water boils. It's the law of nature, yeah? So that's always true. It always boils at 100 degrees. And it will never be changed, yet this rule will not become outdated in a week or in a year or in 100 years, whatever. Giovanni said he plays tennis every Saturday. Again, this is something that he does maybe all his life, and this is his routine or characteristic of his. Yeah, he plays tennis, that's what he regularly does. And the last example here, the young lady knew the place she had been invited to is very popular. So the place is very popular. This subordinate clause is not changed because it's a general truth. Yeah, everybody knows that, and it's a fact. Another situation in which you may not follow the rule of sequence of tenses is if the original speaker was talking about a situation that is still present or future. I told you the kids are up to something. Helen said the construction of the stadium is still underway. Christina warned us that it's raining heavily. In these sentences, we are speaking about situations that hasn't changed yet. They are still present or they are yet to come. So we are not obliged to follow the rules of sequence of tenses here. Another situation in which you may not observe the rules of sequence of tenses is when the speaker believes that they are dealing with facts or statements which are true of all times, are a kind of general truth. He made me understand what a true friendship is. She knew that love cannot be bought. The young man didn't understand that the most expensive thing in the world is time. In these situations, these are beliefs or ideas of our speakers, yeah? And they are considered by them as general truth. That's why we may not follow the rules of sequence of tenses. And the last scenario in which you may not observe the rules of sequence of tenses is with certain modal verbs that only have one form. For example, must, should, ought, and need. I knew she should not lift anything heavy. My psychologist told me I ought to find a hobby. She told her sister she need not worry. Okay, now you know where and when we must follow the rules of sequence of tenses, and where and when we may not observe them if we wish. But I will repeat one more time, it's always a good idea to follow these rules. What do we do if our sentence contains several subordinate clauses? If there are several subordinate clauses in a sentence, the rule of the sequence of tenses is observed in all of them. At that moment, Anna thought she wouldn't stay even if they offered her a good pay raise. Anna thought what? That she wouldn't stay. And she wouldn't stay on what condition? We have two subordinate clauses in this sentence. The main clause is, at that moment, Anna thought. She wouldn't stay is the subordinate object clause, and even if they offered her a good pay raise is the subordinate clause of condition. In this sentence, we sequenced all the tenses, right? And another example, I knew that he had told her that he received the letters every week. I knew what? That he had told her. He told her what? that he received the letters every week. We have two subordinate object clauses. The main clause is I knew. That he had told her is the first subordinate object clause, and that he received the letters every week is the second subordinate object clause. Again, the tenses are sequenced here. The rules of the sequence of tenses are also observed in clauses of the second, third, etc. grade of subordination. In this case, the choice of the tense form does not depend on the tense form in the main clause. It is determined by the form of the verb in the clause to which it is subordinated. This rule is to be remembered. We always look at the clause to which another clause, or the clause we are dealing with, is subordinated to. Let's see. Martha was rewriting a passage after passage, grumbling to herself that she had known how it would be. Lorenzo realized that he was going to faint as he had eaten nothing since lunch. Adam realized that she believed nothing unusual had happened that day. How it would be subordinated to that she had known there and then, yeah? And she had known before she was rewriting. Lorenzo realized that he was going to faint as he had eaten nothing. He had eaten nothing is subordinated to was going to faint. So he was going to faint because before he had eaten nothing. Adam realized she believed. These are simultaneous actions, but this is subordinated to believed. She believed what? That nothing unusual had happened that day. Now, additional attention should be paid to subordinate clauses of time and condition. The subordinate verbs in this kind of sequence are never future in form. They are future in meaning, but not in form. Let's see. The goods will be sent to us only after we pay. Only after we pay is the subordinate clause of time, and though we are talking about the future here, we do not use any future tenses. We must use a present tense. We will go to the beach on Sunday if the weather is sunny. A conditional clause if the weather is sunny. If you remember, we talked about it in my lesson on conditional clauses, conditional sentences. If the weather is sunny, though this condition is about the future, we do not use a future tense here, we use the present simple. I will ask the manager when she returns from the main office. The subordinate clause of time, when she returns from the main office. And we know that in subordinate clauses of time, we do not use any future tenses. The fence will have been taken down by the time the construction is finished. The passive voice, but the present simple tense is used. And why? Because by the time introduces a subordinate clause of time, and in subordinate clauses of time we cannot use any future tenses. So, the goods will be sent to us only after we will pay is incorrect. We cannot use will here. We must say only after we pay. And we will go out in the evening unless it will be raining is also incorrect. We must say unless it is raining. Please note that this principle is not observed in subordinate object clauses. In their form, they are very similar to conditional clauses. Let's look. I don't know if they will come tomorrow. I don't know what. It's not a conditional clause here, if they will come tomorrow. It's an object clause. I don't know what. And they didn't tell us if they would come. They didn't tell us what. Again, an object subordinate clause. That's why, of course, in object clauses, we do follow the rules of the sequence of tenses. Now I invite you to do a little exercise with me. Please pause the video, write the sentences down, do the exercise, and then check it with me. I believe that you have already done that, and thus I will proceed. I forgot what he looked like. I forget what he looks like. The actions in both clauses are simultaneous. And as the predicate in the main clause is in the past simple tense, we must use a past tense in the subordinate clause. She says she is free tomorrow. The verb in the main clause, she says, is in the present simple tense. So no sequencing of tenses happens. She seemed to have forgotten what had happened an hour before. The action in the subordinate clause preceded the action in the main clause, so the past perfect is used. Angelus told me that he had no permit for the gun and that in Greece it is or was illegal to own a gun without a permit. So in the second case here, we can use either is or was, so either the present simple tense or the past simple tense, because here we are dealing with a rule, with a law, which is generally true and is not tied to a particular moment in the past. Martin says he won't speak to his father ever again unless he apologizes. Unless he apologizes is a conditional clause, so even if we speak about the future, we cannot use a future tense. We must use the present simple tense. The concierge told me that an Australian couple had been staying there for a month. The past perfect progressive is used in the subordinate clause because this action preceded the action in the main clause, and the action in the main clause is in the past simple tense. Elizabeth told us she would be staying in Milan the next week to do some shopping. She told us she would. Future in the past is used because we want to sequence the tenses. Why do we want to do that? Because the verb in the main clause, Elizabeth told, is in the past. It was rumored that David and Jane had got married. The action in the subordinate clause preceded the action in the main clause, which is already in the past. And the last one, Aristotle said that happiness is the meaning and purpose of life. We are free to use the present simple tense here because we are talking about his opinion that he considered to be a general truth. Happiness is the meaning and purpose of life. Though you can of course say Aristotle said that happiness was the meaning and purpose of life. Okay, that's all for today. I hope this lesson was useful. Next time we'll speak about reported speech, because that's where we use the sequence of tenses most often. Subscribe to this channel if you're interested in what I'm doing, and see you in the next video.